Kimu SDC with you here today. And I'm going to start it off as always. PLH. Peace, love, and happiness all day with you, all day, every day. And today we're going to talk about ownership. Now, I know in today's society we have a really big thing with ownership where if we if we buy it, we own it. If we name it, we own it. It is ours. It is our possession. And I want to say that this is unfortunately not true. We really don't own anything, and we have to understand that in our world of control, ownership helps feed the ego. That's why when we go out and we buy things that we don't need, we are feeding the ego because we're allowing ourselves to have some type of external control, some type of possession, some type of ownership of something. And what I've learned along my journey is that when you begin to make that conscious decision of finding out of buying things that you do need versus the things that you don't need, and trying to live a much simpler life, then the desire for ownership begins to dwindle away, because now you're beginning to merge your true self with your ego. And I began to realize that when I began to start consciously shopping, I stopped wanting things that I wanted before. Earlier in my journey, I was a big sneaker person. When I went to buy sneakers, shoes, whatever you want to call them, it was a legit process in which I had to go in there and go through, and I had to find, I was very particular, I was very picky, and I had to find out what shoe, okay, I like this shoe. And then I have to figure out, well, does it match anything with my wardrobe? Because I'm not going to buy a pair of shoes and it doesn't match anything in my wardrobe, or I can't put it with anything in my wardrobe. So I would go through that process, and if I could, then I would put it on my foot and I would try it on, see how it looks, go through the whole process. And if I didn't like it, or even if I did, then I would go on and I would find more shoes that, okay, do I like this one better? Is this more versatile? It was an entire conversation that I would go through with myself and with somebody that I was with, or my other friend who's the same way, in which I had to find out whether one was more versatile than the other, or how can this go with anything? Like, I wasn't going to buy one pair of shoes just for one shirt. So when I began to realize that ownership, just realize that I don't own anything in this universe. I don't own the body that I have. I don't own the air that I breathe. I mean, just inhale with me. Exhale. See, it's the law of exchange with the universe. You take one thing and you give back something else. So when you breathe, you're taking in that air, that life force that the universe is giving us, and then you're giving it back in another form. We breathe in the air, which has nitrogen, oxygen, and all these other compounds, and then we're giving it back in a new form because our body has to break it down and process it. Our body, we don't own our body. how don't we own our body? Think about it. You're given this body at birth, well, more so at conception, in which you begin to form from the combination of cells, and then those cells begin to replicate, reproduce, and to forming you. Then you grow up, you get older, and then the body dies. Well, you came from the earth, therefore you must go there. Therefore, the earth you must return, as it says in any form of spiritual guide. And once I realized that I don't own anything, because of the fact that the first Hermetic principle, all is one. So therefore, if I am me, then the earth is also me, and therefore I must return to which I came, the physically. So even as a parent, you don't own your you don't own your children. In the concept of karma, you are more so a spiritual. You are a guide. You are a teacher for the physical world, for the spiritual world of children. The child is not really yours, but the ego wishes for you to think that way, and it doesn't help. And in my journey, I've realized it doesn't help, because when you decide that you want to control something, it may impact the child in a negative way, it may impact the child in a positive way. But the form of control can be contagious, especially in the adolescent phases of the child. So, and I began to realize that and I definitely encourage you to realize that once you decide that you don't really own anything, and therefore you're not connected to things. The things don't make you happy. The things don't make you you. When you begin to sever that connection between yourself and things, then life becomes so much easier. I've realized that when I began to sever that connection, when I began to disconnect myself from things, I realized that they're just interactions. They're just frequencies meeting at a certain space and time, rather than this is me, this is who I am, this food is what makes me, these shoes are what make me, these clothes are what make me, this person is what makes me. When we begin to break that connection and veer away from identifying ourselves with the external world, life becomes so much easier. And then therefore, we're always feeling good, feeling great all day, every day, going to reach new limits. Because those connections, when we begin to connect ourselves with things or just frequencies in general that do not help build us, that keep us grounded to this egotistic state of being, then we struggle. And it's definitely a struggle to begin to realize and to open and to activate and unblock and balance the solar plexus chakra in this nature, because of the fact that we're programmed to identify ourselves with the external world. We're programmed to connect ourselves with things that are external to our own being, our own self. We're prone to buy things out of getting ahead of someone else, that competitive nature, so that way we can say that we own quantity instead of quality. I'm going to say that again, just in case you didn't catch it. We're prone in this society to think that if we own more quantity, we're getting a step ahead instead of owning more quality. What is the quality is a good question. The quality is yourself. Because once you realize that the only thing that you can control is yourself, the only thing that you can own, that you can actually own, is your behavior. You can take accountability for the behavior, for the energy, for the perception, for the world that you choose. Then life becomes much easier. We live in such a complicated world in which the simpler life is so complicated. Why is simpler so much complicated? Because we begin to overthink. I realized that when I was in school, I began to, as an engineer, I began to overthink a lot of things. I was like, it can't be this simple. It has to be more complicated than this. It has to be something else about this problem that it's not simple. And the action of overthinking causes us to get away from the simple lifestyle. So I want to challenge you on an everyday basis to try to go for that simpler lifestyle, to try to disconnect yourself from the necessary physical world, from the immediate physical world of connecting yourselves to things, and break that disconnection so that way you may grow every day and release that idea of ownership and that idea of I am connected to this. This is what makes me me. Stop feeding that ego. This might be probably one of the hardest chakras to balance on the ego level, because of the society that we bring and what ownership actually helps quench a thirst, a hunger that quenches the ego. But when we're able to sublime the ego and expand who we are, then we can always be like, woo! Kimu, SDC, with you all day, every day. PLH, as always. Peace, love, and happiness all day, every day. Kimu SDC, over and out. Peace.